So no matter what happens in Europe, countries will be looking to the US for examples of what to do and what not to do. Companies here are now required to list exactly which chemicals they're pumping into the ground, but the industry has complained that by doing so, it's giving up trade secrets. Jessica Stone spoke exclusively with the top regulator in one of the top producing states, Pennsylvania, and she asked Chris Abruzzo why that should not be a concern.
Well, it protects the proprietary information in the sense that we do not require the companies to put their exact proportionality of each chemical they use. And so there are some trade secrets in terms of how much of each chemical each company uses to constitute their particular hydraulic fracturing fluid. And each company has a different, has had different experiences with which fluids work the best for them. But that being said, I'm comfortable that based on the testing we've done and the test industry has performed, that these combinations of chemicals handled the way they're handled and with the protections in place that we've required by regulation are being injected safely.
Are complaints going up?
Complaints
with activity? Complaints from homeowners, problems, any sort of complaint about water or air or just an altercation with a company?
No, the complaints that we get typically center around the drilling activity potentially causing water well contamination.
Has that happened?
The number of those complaints, I think that they are down generally. One of the things that we found sort of going through this whole process in the last couple of years is that the water well construction standards for individual homeowners' water wells are lacking. There are no standards for water well construction. So in a number of areas of the state, where we thought oil and gas drilling activity may have been the cause of methane gas migration, it either wasn't the cause or because you had faulty water well construction, and so there was methane in those water wells long before there was oil and gas drilling activity, because there is methane found in the ground, right? So it's not, the methane in the ground travels depending on the geologic formation and can enter a water well if it's faulty, if it's not constructed well. So we found instances where we investigated those complaints and we found that oil and gas drilling activity was not the cause. And we found instances like in Dept, where ultimately we found that oil and gas drilling activity was the cause of methane gas migration into those wells.
Let me move to something that's actually happening in your Attorney General's office, not in your department, but it impacts the industry nonetheless, and that is the first criminal prosecution of polluting the environment against a major drilling company. This company is XTO, a subsidiary of ExxonMobil, and it was a Department of Environmental Protection employee who found the initial violation of a leaking wastewater back in 2010. You're aware that this is going through the courts, and I want to know, what is the role of the Department of Environmental Protection now? Will you follow up if there are findings in this case? Are you already following up with your own set of regulatory fines or enforcement actions?
We have our own parallel proceeding. So at this point, we investigated the case. We referred it to the Attorney General's office for investigation, for their criminal investigation. We did our own parallel investigation, and we do have what I would consider a resolution that we could move forward with, but out of respect to the criminal case, we're paying deference to that and allowing that to play out.
I think you have a good regulatory structure in the state.
I think it's pretty good. If you said, is it great?
Better?
Yeah, absolutely, it can be better. And that's one of the things.
What do you think would make it better?
There are some of the unintended consequences. I've noticed that there are some industries, for instance, I'll use the conventional well operators, the conventional oil well operators. There are requirements that appear in Act 13 that associated with notification requirements to homeowners or municipalities that really don't apply at all to the conventional well operator up in Warren County, who has 5 oil wells that were drilled in 1910 and produce a gallon of crude oil a week. And yet those meeting that regulatory requirement has a real cost to these guys. And their margins are slim already. So while the regulatory framework, I think, is very strong, under the Oil and Gas Act and Act 13, it was really predominantly focused on unconventional well operators. But we didn't always make that distinction. And so other folks got caught up in this regulatory framework that really probably were unnecessarily so.
There are other jurisdictions around the world that are considering some type of regulation of this industry. What would your takeaway be for them?
I'd point to the Marcellus Shale Commission and say, put together a commission of folks from all walks of life, from all sides of the issue. Sit down, meet the way this group did, have meaningful dialogue that centers around the facts and the science. There was an awful lot of hype floating around this industry. We all had to deal with it. Some of it was completely insane and was not grounded in reality. Others of it was right on target. And looking back now in hindsight, I look at the work the commission did and I say, these folks got it right. I don't think anybody should get or be left with the impression that we think it's being done perfectly. But we're certainly going to strive to get there.
Okay. Chris Abruzzo, Acting Director of the Environmental Protection Department here in the state of Pennsylvania. Thanks for your time.
You're very welcome.